Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because today we're diving deep into one of the most powerful and misunderstood human emotions, anger. And I want to be clear from the start, anger is not the problem emotion that many people believe it is. Anger is not inherently bad, destructive, or something to be ashamed of. It is a fundamental human emotion that serves important psychological functions and provides valuable information about your boundaries, values, and needs. The problem is not anger itself, it is how anger is expressed, suppressed, or misunderstood. And most people have a deeply confused relationship with anger because they were never taught what it actually is, why it exists, what it is trying to communicate, or how to work with it in healthy ways. So today, we're breaking down the psychology of anger, what it is at a neurological and psychological level, why this emotion evolved, what purpose it serves, the different types and sources of anger, what anger is really telling you, the costs of suppressing or expressing it unhealthily, and most importantly, how to develop a healthier relationship with anger so it becomes information and energy rather than something that controls or destroys you. Let us start with understanding what anger actually is from a scientific perspective, because this foundation changes everything. Anger is an emotional and physiological response to perceived threat, injustice, boundary violation, or blocked goals. When you experience anger, multiple systems in your brain and body activate simultaneously. Your amygdala, which is your threat detection center, identifies something as wrong or dangerous. Your hypothalamus triggers the release of stress hormones including adrenaline and cortisol, preparing your body for action. Your heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, muscles tense, breathing quickens, and blood flow is redirected to your extremities. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking center, often becomes less active while your limbic system, the emotional center, takes over. This is the physiological anger response, and it is essentially a mobilization for confrontation or defense. Anger energizes you to take action, to fight back, to enforce boundaries, or to change a situation that is unacceptable. Now let us talk about the evolutionary purpose of anger, because understanding why this emotion exists helps you stop judging it as bad. Anger evolved as a survival mechanism in response to threats and injustices. When our ancestors faced physical threats from predators, rival groups, or hostile environments, anger provided the motivation and energy to fight rather than flee or freeze. It increased chances of survival by mobilizing aggression when necessary. Anger also served crucial social functions. It communicated to others that boundaries had been violated, that behavior was unacceptable, or that change was needed. It helped maintain social order, enforce fairness, and protect resources. Groups with members who could mobilize anger in response to injustice were better able to cooperate, defend themselves, and survive. So, anger is not a malfunction, it is an adaptive response that served important purposes throughout human evolution. The problem is that modern anger often arises in contexts where aggression is not appropriate or effective, which creates internal conflict about how to handle the emotion. Let us discuss what anger is actually signaling, because anger is always information. Anger tells you that something important to you is being threatened, violated, or blocked. It might be signaling that your boundaries are being crossed, someone is treating you disrespectfully, taking advantage of you, or violating your autonomy. It might be signaling injustice you or someone you care about is being treated unfairly, and your sense of right and wrong is violated. It might be signaling unmet needs, you have needs for respect, recognition, autonomy, safety, or fairness that are not being met. It might be signaling that your goals are blocked, you are trying to accomplish something and obstacles are in your way, creating frustration. It might be signaling that you feel threatened physically, emotionally, or to your sense of self. And sometimes anger is a secondary emotion that covers more vulnerable feelings like hurt, fear, shame, or powerlessness. Many people find it easier or safer to feel angry than to feel hurt or scared, so anger becomes the protective shell around softer emotions. Now let us talk about different types of anger, because not all anger is the same. There is healthy anger, which is proportional to the situation, directed at the appropriate target, time-limited, and motivates constructive action. This is anger that says this is not okay and leads you to set a boundary, address an injustice, or protect yourself. Healthy anger is an ally. Then there's unhealthy anger, which can take several forms. There is explosive anger that is disproportionate to the situation, directed at inappropriate targets, and expressed destructively through yelling, physical aggression, or verbal abuse. This kind of anger damages relationships and often masks deeper issues like shame, trauma, or feeling powerless. There is chronic anger where you are angry most of the time, have a short fuse, and see threats and injustices everywhere. This is exhausting, damages your health, and usually reflects unprocessed pain, unresolved conflicts, or a nervous system stuck in defensive mode. There is passive anger, which is unexpressed directly, but comes out through passive-aggressive behavior, sarcasm, sulking, sabotage, or giving the silent treatment. People who express anger passively often fear direct confrontation or learned that anger is unacceptable, so it comes out sideways in ways that are confusing and damaging to relationships. There is internalized anger or anger turned inward, where you direct the anger at yourself rather than the appropriate target. This manifests as harsh self-criticism, self-punishment, self-sabotage, or depression. Many people who were taught that anger is bad or who felt unsafe expressing anger outward learn to direct it inward, which is psychologically destructive. And there is righteous anger or moral outrage, which arises in response to perceived violations of justice or moral standards. This can be healthy when it motivates positive change and advocacy. But it can also become toxic when it turns into constant judgment, self-righteousness, or rage that prevents nuance and understanding. Let us discuss the common sources and triggers of anger, because understanding what activates your anger helps you work with it more effectively. Boundary violations are a major trigger when someone disrespects you, takes advantage, invades your privacy, or treats you as if your needs do not matter. Anger arises to signal that this is not okay. Perceived injustice or unfairness triggers anger. Seeing yourself or others treated unjustly activates moral anger. Feeling disrespected, dismissed, or invalidated is a powerful anger trigger when people do not take you seriously, ignore your perspective, or treat you as if you do not matter. Anger responds. Feeling powerless or out of control triggers anger when you cannot change a situation, when things feel chaotic, or when you lack agency. Anger can be an attempt to regain a sense of power. Threat to self-esteem or identity triggers anger. Criticism, rejection, or situations that make you feel inadequate can activate defensive anger. Frustration from blocked goals is a common trigger when you are trying to accomplish something and keep hitting obstacles. Frustration builds into anger. Past trauma and unresolved pain can create anger triggers. If you have unprocessed hurt from your past, current situations that resemble those old wounds can trigger disproportionate anger. And sometimes anger is triggered by stress, fatigue, hunger, or physical discomfort. When your nervous system is already taxed, you have less capacity to regulate emotions, and small irritations can trigger big anger. Now let us talk about what happens when anger is chronically suppressed or denied, because many people were taught that anger is bad and must be hidden. When you suppress anger, it does not disappear, it goes underground and causes problems. Suppressed anger often manifests as depression. Anger turned inward becomes self-directed negativity and loss of vitality. It can manifest as anxiety. The energy of anger with nowhere to go creates internal tension and nervousness. It can create physical health problems. Chronic suppression of anger is linked to headaches, high blood pressure, digestive issues, and other stress-related conditions. It can lead to passive-aggressive behavior since direct expression feels unsafe. Anger leaks out in indirect, manipulative ways. It can cause sudden explosive outbursts. Suppressed anger builds pressure until it erupts disproportionately over small triggers. And suppressing anger prevents you from addressing legitimate problems. If you never acknowledge or express anger, boundaries stay violated, injustices continue, and needs remain unmet. But let us also discuss what happens when anger is expressed destructively, because that creates problems too. Explosive, aggressive anger damages relationships. Yelling, name-calling, intimidation, or physical aggression drives people away and creates fear rather than understanding. It teaches others to avoid you or walk on eggshells rather than respecting boundaries. Destructive anger expression often leads to shame and regret after an outburst. You feel terrible about how you acted, which can feed into cycles of anger and self-loathing. It prevents effective problem-solving. When you are in rage, your prefrontal cortex is offline, which means you cannot think clearly, communicate effectively, or find constructive solutions. It can escalate conflicts. Aggression often triggers defensive anger in others, creating escalating cycles of mutual hostility. And chronic explosive anger keeps your nervous system in a state of dysregulation. You are constantly activated, which is exhausting and unhealthy. So what does healthy anger look like, and how do you develop a better relationship with this emotion? First, recognize and acknowledge anger when it arises rather than denying or suppressing it. Notice the physical sensations, tension, heat, energy, and name the emotion. This simple acknowledgement prevents anger from building unconsciously. Second, pause before acting on anger. Create space between the feeling and your response. This might mean taking deep breaths, stepping away from the situation, or counting to 10. The pause allows your prefrontal cortex to come back online so you can choose your response rather than reacting automatically. Third, get curious about what the anger is telling you. Ask yourself, what boundary was crossed? What need is unmet? What value is being violated? What am I actually feeling underneath the anger? Hurt, fear, powerlessness. Understanding the message helps you address the real issue rather than just venting the emotion. Fourth, express anger assertively rather than aggressively or passively. Assertive anger expression means stating clearly and calmly what the problem is, how it affects you, and what you need to change, without attacking, blaming, or manipulating. Use as statements, I feel angry when you interrupt me because I feel disrespected, and I need you to let me finish speaking, rather than use statements that blame. You always interrupt. You are so rude. Fifth, use physical outlets to discharge anger energy when needed. Anger creates physiological arousal that needs somewhere to go. Exercise, punching a pillow, vigorous cleaning, or other physical activity can discharge the energy without harming anyone. Sixth, address the underlying issue that triggered the anger. If anger is signaling a boundary violation, set or reinforce the boundary. If it is signaling injustice, take action to address it. If it is covering hurt, acknowledge and process the hurt. Anger is most useful when it motivates constructive change. Seventh, examine patterns in your anger. If you find yourself angry frequently or disproportionately, that is information that something deeper needs attention, possibly unresolved trauma, chronic stress, unmet needs, or underlying depression or anxiety. Working with a therapist can help you understand and address these patterns. Eighth, practice self-compassion about having anger. Stop judging yourself as bad or broken for feeling angry. Anger is human, normal, and informative. What matters is what you do with it. And ninth, recognize when anger is not about the present situation, but about past unresolved issues. If your anger seems bigger than the current trigger warrants, that is often a sign of old wounds being activated. This is valuable information that points toward healing work that needs to be done. Let us also discuss anger in relationships specifically, because this is where anger is often most challenging. In healthy relationships, anger can be expressed and heard without destroying the relationship. Partners can say, I am angry about this, explain why, and work together toward resolution. But this requires both people to have skills for handling anger constructively. If you are the one experiencing anger, communicate it when you are calm enough to be clear. Focus on specific behaviors rather than character attacks. Express what you need rather than just venting, and be open to hearing the other person's perspective. If you are receiving someone else's anger, try not to get defensive immediately. Listen to understand what they need rather than just defending yourself. Validate their feelings even if you disagree with their interpretation, and work toward finding a solution rather than winning the argument. If this video helped you understand anger differently, please give it a thumbs up and share it. Drop a comment. What is your relationship with anger like, and what patterns do you notice? And remember, anger is not the enemy. It is information, energy, and sometimes protection. The goal is not to eliminate anger but to understand it, respect what it is telling you, and express it in ways that serve you and your relationships rather than destructing them. Your anger is valid, and learning to work with it rather than against it is one of the most important emotional skills you can develop. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.